Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to Mishnah Yomi land. We are in Bava Metzia, chapter 6, a socher et ha'umnin, about, employment law. We're in Mishnah Bet, hasocher et ha'umnin, someone hired workers, v'chazru b'hen. They started the job and then they stopped. Now, yesterday we talked about a case where you had hired schleppers or workers and they hadn't even started the work, what the liability was if they said we're not going to do it, or what you could do. Here, they actually started the job and they're quitting halfway. Now, if these were hourly employees, you would just pay them for the hours they worked and they go on their merry way, and that's that. But these are contractors. They've accepted a contract, for instance, to paint your fence for $100. And now they've stopped halfway, they don't want to do it anymore. So what do we do now? Yadan al hatachtona. If they've retracted and they say we're not going to finish the fence, they have the lower hand. What this means is if the agreed price for the contract was $100 and they've done $50 worth of work, but now you need to hire someone else and you could only hire for $60, well, then the original guys who quit, they only get $40. But now if the price is lower and you can hire someone to finish the job for only $40, the original guys don't get $60. They only get half of the agreed upon contract price because that's what they agreed to and they did half the work. Im balabayit chozer, if it's the homeowner, the guy whose fence it is, if he's retracting and saying, you know what guys, go home. I know you did half of the work, go home, I'll get someone else. Yadu ala tachtona, he has the lower hand. And again, the original workers, they get paid at least the 50% of the price that they've done 50% of the work, or they get paid 60 if, to finish the work only costs 40. The Mishnah adds, Kol Mishana, anyone who's changing, who's, deviating from the instructions or the contract, Yado ala tachtona, he has the lower hand when it comes to getting paid. This actually refers back to a case you had in Bava. Remember, you gave the dyer some wool and he dyed it the wrong color. So, if the value has increased, okay, that's great, but it's not the color you wanted, so there are cases where you'd only pay him for the supplies he used and not the actual increase. Or he's paid the value of the increase in value, even if his supplies cost more, because he's the one who made the mistake and changed the instructions. The Mishnah concludes, anyone who retracts what they agreed to has the lower hand. The Gemara says this refers to a sale of land. Someone's buying a field, and he's paid half as a down payment. He's made a 50% down payment, and the seller retracts. If the seller retracts, the buyer can say, listen, give me all my money back, or he can say, listen, I gave you a 50% down payment, give me 50% of the field. Now, Mishnah Gimel applies this concept to renting an animal. He rented a donkey, loicha bahar, and the stipulation was it's going to go in the mountains. This is a mountain donkey. Loicha bevika. He went into the lowlands, into the valley. Bebika, or the stipulation was, this is a valley donkey, holicha bahar, and the renter took it up the mountains. Afilu zo eser milin, v'zo eser milin, even if the road he took was the exact same distance. Umeta, Nebuch, the donkey dropped dead, chayev, the renter must pay for the donkey. He was mishana, he changed the instructions. The Gemara they explain in the Gemara, the air, the atmosphere is different in these different locations. The donkey just wasn't accustomed to it. The Mishnah goes on, a homor. He rented a donkey, vehivrika, it went blind. Oshenoset angaria, or the government seized it to make use of it. Eminent domain. Omer lo, he can tell him, Hare shelcha lefenecha. So the donkey owner can tell the renter, there's your donkey. It's kind of your bad luck. The idea here is a blind donkey is still kind of usable. You just have to guide it a lot more. And the donkey that was seized, well, what they would do is they would seize an animal for a little while, schlep their stuff, and then they'd kind of leave it, and you could pick up your donkey again, typically, and then they would go steal someone else's donkey. It's kind of like the Pony Express, but here the government's using private citizen ponies, not their own. Mishnah goes on, Meta o nishbara, if the donkey dropped dead, or it broke a leg, Chayv hamidlo chamor, then the owner of the donkey has to provide a replacement donkey for the rental period. Now finally, the Mishnah notes a case where changing doesn't cause the problem. He rented a donkey to go in the mountains, instead he was on the flatland, the valley, Potter. If the donkey slipped and was injured, the renter doesn't pay. Im huchma, but if the donkey overheated, chayev, then he would have to pay because it's hotter, thicker air down in the valley. Leholicha bevika, if you rented it to go up the mountain, to go in the valley, holicha bahar, he went up the mountain. Im chayev, if it slips and falls, he has to pay. The going up the mountain is a lot more difficult for the animal if he's accustomed to flat ground. And if it overheats, it's usually cooler at a higher elevation, so overheating is not likely, so the renter would not pay. His change didn't cause the problem. But the Mishnah says, if the donkey overheated because the engine was taxed going up the steep hill, then the renter would have to pay. Sometimes guys from Lakewood, where it's flat, they come down to Baltimore and they ride bicycles with the local Baltimore guys where it's, quite hilly, and we actually see this happen, Lamaisa, and it always reminds me of this Mishnah. Yashar kochachem tizku lemitzvot.